Welcome, League Esports fans, to another episode of the No FFs podcast, a podcast where we hit it hard, we hit it fast, and we don't take any Fs from anyone. All right, League Esports fans, we've got a special episode in store for you. We have Zach Lindsey on from the League Leaders podcast, a podcast all about clutch gaming. Zach, how you doing, man?
I wish I had a better record to come in here with, but doing pretty great.
Yeah, it's been a kind of an interesting year. You know, I had a lot of hope for Clutch coming into the year, you know, having signed two of the stronger members of Echo Fox, but definitely been, you know, a lot of ups and downs for you guys early on.
Oh, yeah. A lot more down than up right now, but it looks like we're turning it around for the moment. So, all
right. So if you're not familiar with Zach or his podcast, he's on Twitter at ZLindsey01. That's ZLINDSEY01. He runs the League Leaders podcast with his dad, George. Again, it's a podcast all clutch gaming. But I think if you're interested in League Esports at all, if you're interested in the LCS, they're a great follow. They produce a ton of content weekly. They've got, you know, a lot of access with the team. And it's just a great podcast to follow. How can we follow your podcast, Zach?
Well, for right now, we are on SoundCloud, or you can just follow us on Twitter. That's probably the easy. That's League_Leaders1. Pretty simple. Just follow us there, and you'll be able to see everything. We also post very regularly on the Clutch Gaming subreddit, so you can find us there as well.
All right. The first thing I wanted to ask was about your podcast. Now, I think what you've done in about a year and a half, right? Is that about the time frame you guys have been running this?
Yeah, it's about. Actually, no, we're about a year old right now.
Okay.
Week 3 is when we started our practice runs, so to speak, and then we published in spring playoffs of 2018. All
right. So I think the concept that you and your dad came up with is brilliant, right? Like this fan-oriented, you know, focused on a team. I think that this is the future sports leagues where you're able to generate more interest from a local fan base. And I really love what Clutch have done by saying, hey, we're sponsored by Rockets, so let's own Texas. And that's kind of how you guys got involved with Clutch, right? Because of the Houston Rockets connection. So talk about that.
Yeah. So my dad, we were originally from Kentucky, but my dad moved down to Houston. He's a morning radio show host there. And so being a big basketball fan, he immediately latched onto the Rockets, started doing a lot of stuff with them. And then when same time, he was nagging me, why are you watching people play video games? What the heck is all this stuff you're doing on the weekends? Why aren't you going out and doing things? And so from there, when the Rockets picked up Clutch Gaming and got into the LCS, I was like, hey, Dad, this is that thing that I'm doing. This is esports, you know, same way that you watch football on the weekends, I watch League on the weekends. And from there, he's like, well, we got to do something. We got to make something out of this. So I'm like, come on, there's nothing to be done here. You know, I'm not an expert. I like to think that I am, but, you know, I don't have the same credit. Where do we go from here? And he's like, if we can get to be just focused on Clutch, if we can just take that one team out of everything else and follow them, we can make a podcast about that. Trust me. And I was like, all right, you know, you know nothing about this game. I've got you to play it all at once, you know, that back and forth. So we spent most of spring 2018 practicing. I taught him about the game. He taught me how to sound good on a podcast. It was a really great bonding experience. And then, of course, there was that great run where Clutch upset TSM in the quarterfinals of spring last year. That really very, very great. That was our second episode was, oh my God, they won. So
yeah, I think it's great what you're doing. And so there's you and there's 100 Talk, the 100 Thieves podcast. Is there? I looked, and it's hard to like Google these things sometimes because everyone's more active on like the specific Reddits or on Twitter. Is there another? Sure. Are there other like team focused podcasts in the LCS?
I think us and 100 Talk are the only ones right now.
I think you're the only ones.
Funny. we kind of like came about both in summer. I think we started just a little bit before them, but I don't know. We go back and forth about who inspired who all the time.
Yeah.
I'm really good friends with those guys. They're great podcasts as well.
They are. Jordan and Cole
but yeah, I think we're the only two.
I think it's great. And this is my thing, and this is why I wanted to talk to you. I think if there are content creators out there that are interested in League and want to talk about it, I think the team-focused podcasting is the way to go. Like, regardless of whether, like, just pick a team. Like, it'd be great if you had an affiliation with them, but like, this is the way to it's not only good for the teams, right? You build these local or like more concentrated fan bases, but I think it's a great way to get into content creation.
Sure.
You bite off smaller chunks and you really get to get better access, right? You guys have had, let's see, you've had DeMonte on. I think, are you guys having Hooney on, or is that coming?
Yep. We have Hooney on. That's going to be this week's episode. Be watching for that. That's going to be very, very soon. But we've had DeMonte on. We've spoken with Vulcan. We got to actually be the ones who broke the news that Cody's son was going to be joining our academy team. And of course, we've got a great relationship with the coach, Brendan McGee. He's been on a couple of times with us, and he's always a great time to talk to.
So definitely stay tuned and follow them on Twitter. Follow them wherever they are. Stay tuned for that Hooney episode. He's a great interview. What type of guy is he?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. He was very reserved, a lot more reserved than I was expecting, but we actually got to talk with him right after a round of scrim. So maybe his mind was a little bit elsewhere. He did have time to flame me and say that I'm the reason my top laner's crazy pick isn't working. But you know, it is what it is. So.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about Clutch. So you saw Hooney and DeMonte over from Echofox, who had made playoffs both splits last year. And it's like they were Hooney was definitely the guy that Echofox had built around. And Tanner kind of came on as the year went on. He became more of a primary carry. They actually let Phoenix go for him. And so you signed these two players over, and it's like, this seems like it's the year, like last year you're feeling things out, but now you have a roster of veterans, Piglet's coming back in the bot lane. It's not been quite the, successful marriage that we've seen so far. I wanted to, get past that, and we all know like some of the struggles, but then last week, you guys, in actually the last 2 weeks, shown some signs of life. Tell me what you've seen in terms of the development. I don't want to harp too much on the stuff that's gone wrong. Let's look to the future. What's going better in the last 4 games that they've played?
That's the basis of it. With all of their skilled, experienced players, they're all hyper versatile. This is past 2 weeks actually. We've run Cassiopeia in the top lane instead of in the bot lane or mid lane. And then we've actually run Aurelia bottom with an Alistair support, and it's been great. I mean, you saw that Piglet was able to absolutely dominate against Golden Guardians when they tried their Yasuo bottom lane composition. And then he was able to play very safe and still succeed when he was up against a traditional marksman as well. It's been kind of surprising to see them have more success without a marksman for Piglet than with a marksman for Piglet. It's very, very strange. But at the same time, you're seeing that Hooney is also really able to make use of either counter pick or just bait the enemy team into counter picking themselves. Like you saw against the 100 Thieves most recently, he picked Tank Karma against Riven. Now, nobody else is doing this, but Hooney was able to make it absolutely work, and he picked it blind too. They were expecting 100 Thieves to go Riven, and they played right into it.
Yeah, I really wanted to talk about that Riven game versus Karma because it was a very successful lane phase from Hooney. He survived some of the disjointed ganks that we've seen from the 100 Thieves top jungle duo, and actually went really well for him. That's one thing that has not surprised me, but it's like after seeing Hooney feed so many times earlier on in the year, it's good to see him back on his game a little bit more, and they're actually achieving early leads in lane. I think that's actually a big sign. Where their early game, like it's really hard to win, especially in this meta where it's so fast. If you're falling behind by 15, 20 minutes, if your turrets kind of, without went out without contesting anything. And I think that's a great sign. Is that what you've seen, that their early game has improved specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. It not only the fact that these flex picks allow them to be much more dominant laners, but they've just had better lane phases in general. You haven't really needed Lyra as much, whereas in past weeks, a lot of the times where they were struggling, it relied on Lyra to make something happen. And you saw how well they were doing with those level 2 ganks, but then nothing happened for 20 minutes. And well, that's not early game anymore. That one advantage you had was never built upon, and so it just kind of stagnated. Right now, you're able to see the laners making these advantages for themselves, and then the snowball gets rolling a lot easier. Yeah,
it definitely kind of ran into a wall, right? Like they talk about how 100 Thieves just kind of scaled in that game. Like Huni eventually got to that point where Tank Karma isn't actually a sieger. You know, she's like pushing the wave to level 2, and they're just catching the wave, and she's not actually exerting any pressure.
Right, and that was definitely a reason they weren't able to bring that game back after their awful, terrible Panic Baron situation. But that was really just one mistake after the other, and they entirely blew their gold lead in about 3 minutes. And it was an 8K gold lead, perfect game up until then, and it was just gone. And from that point, the scaling meant that they just couldn't get back. If they hadn't made that initial mistake in the first place, I guarantee you they would have been able to clean that out. But there was one wrong teleport from Piglet, a really good play from Onda, and then everybody just lost their minds until it was already too late. So, happens.
It happens. But the good news is, they come back and they beat Echo Fox, Echo Fox are really struggling right now. But I did so when I wrote down in my notes, you guys locked in Cassiopeia and you sent her top lane for Huni. And I wrote down in my notes, very early on in the lane phase, he put a ward at the opponent's red like behind the red buff. And it's like from blue side, that is an extremely aggressive ward. It's like one of those wards, it's like, if you're not playing well, there are so many ways for you to get ganked from different angles. It could be a recipe for disaster. But if you're like galaxy braining it and you're like, I can sense the jungle pressure, that's actually a really valuable ward, because now you're getting a timer on their jungle. And if you're able to coordinate with your team where you think the jungler is based off of both what you see and what you don't see, like if you don't see him there, you can kind of make some assumptions. It's actually really valuable.
Exactly.
He actually played that lane phase out. I think that's one of the best lane phases he's had all year.
Absolutely. It's really ironic that in both their matchups against Echo Fox, you see Huni absolutely popping off. That was their first game, actually, where he was flashing over the Krug pit to kill Karthus when he was Rumble. Karthus poked him once, and he's like, okay, guess you're dead. And now you see him with the Cassiopeia just this past weekend, 1v1ing a Yorick, and Lyra stole the first blood, but that was mostly done by Huni.
So he's stabilizing things a little bit. I think Monte continues to play well. I think he's not, I wouldn't say he's like one of the top 3 or 4 mids, but he's definitely not someone where I would point at him and say he's a weakness, right? There's definitely mistakes in his gameplay, but that game, you brought up the Aurelia game that Piglet played. I actually thought that DeMonte kind of won them that game. They had a fight in the red jungle later on where DeMonte went in on Yasuo, and it caused the rest of the team to kind of go in with him. I think he's shown me a lot. I think he's definitely like a player. Like he's definitely someone you can build around. Have you seen that?
For sure.
That?
I've seen that the whole time. He's having a few rookie mistakes. Unfortunately, because he was playing last summer, you can't really call him a rookie technically, but he's still got a lot of that rookie mistakes to him. That honestly, they're going to get ironed out over time. This is a player that I am hyper confident in. When everything else is crumbling, I'm really hoping DeMonte still looks good. That hasn't always happened, but I'm still very, very confident that you give him another split or even a year, and he's going to be one of those top 3 mid laners.
All right, so we talked about top, we've talked about mid. I'm going to skip jungle, but I want to get your thoughts on the bot lane, because I thought early on, Vulcan really struggled. I saw some instances in lane where he seemed like he wasn't making the right decisions. There were some bungled kind of team fight calls in the mid and late game. I think Piglet, I don't know if I've seen world champion Piglet for a while now, not just this year. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that duo? Is it one where they just need to play together more? The crit meta might help Piglet a little bit. Is it one where you're actually concerned about the long term fit of these two players?
I'm a lot less concerned about Vulcan, honestly. He's
Really?
shown
Okay.
a lot of improvement, and you can see a lot of that. He was the one who was really setting up these level 2 ganks they were doing for a couple weeks. That Lyra would just red buff to Krugs straight into bottom lane and
Yep.
get first blood. I think that was like 2 or 3 games in a row they were able to pull that off. And honestly, that was set up by some immaculate play from Vulcan. It really was. And the same thing with both of the Aurelia games, really. He's played that lane to perfection, in my opinion. And there's a lot of issues with the team in the mid to late game. And I think that's just kind of endemic of having a 2-language system where they're trying to have Huni or Piglet translate for Lyra, more or less.
Oh, interesting.
And where it's really kind of, yeah, that's something that we're going to get into in our episode. We actually talked to Huni about the communication. So
Okay.
be sure and tune in for that.
Yeah.
But he said that it's very much a 2-language system where most of the time he's the go-between. So I think that's more their issue rather than any individual player in the late game. But I am going to agree with you that I think Piglet has not quite shown back up yet. There's been a lot of face checking on Crit Marksman. His Caitlyn game a few weeks ago where he was walking just randomly through the jungle leading his team. And then this past weekend where he teleports back in and gets immediately blown up by 100 Thieves. And it's like, that's not something that someone of his caliber should be making. That's not the kind of mistakes you expect from Piglet. So he's the one I'm a little bit more concerned about in the bottom lane. But actually, if the bruiser picks continue, then I actually have a lot more confidence because he's just so good at managing the lane in that kind of a state, along with Vulcan. And I think that's really their strength, is that not many people know how to deal with that at the moment. Everybody's working to get back to these crit marksmen, trying to reset and go back to the old way of doing things. And Clutch is just saying, sure, whatever, we'll do our own thing. And I think that's really the biggest strength right now.
So in the late game, I don't want to preview your episode too much, but who kind of does organize the calls? Is one of the, usually it's support jungle who are kind of defining what you're doing on the map. Vulcan's a really young player, and then Lyra, his English is not as good as the other two. Kind of who's taking charge in those situations for this team?
From what we were getting, it's a lot more flexible than that. Because there is that sort of 2-language coordination going on, it's very hard for one person to really be the leader. Outside of Huni, honestly. He's the one who says he feels like he should be leading a lot of the times, but if somebody sees a good play, they just go for it. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of these missteps. You said earlier that you saw a great play by DeMonte that everybody followed up on, and well, not all the time will they always be able to follow up like that. So I think that's kind of the high risk, high reward play style that we've been seeing from this team the whole time. Got it.
The last question I have for you is, it's going to be tough for you to make playoffs. Let's talk about 2019. I don't know if you're there yet, but for me, it's time to look right now in my episodes and my analysis. I'm starting to look forward a little bit more, both for the playoff teams and for the teams that I think may struggle to get in. What do you hope to see from them kind of going into the summer split, even from a development standpoint, from a, do they keep the same players and just work on kind of execution and communication, or what are you hoping to see that would, even results aside, because we want to be process oriented, give you a good feeling about this, what they've done in 2019?
Honestly, if we're looking strictly at the process of things and not at all at the results at the end of the split here, I think there needs to be a very heavy consideration about a 2-jungler system, about having Lyra some of the time and trying him out with someone else. Honestly, I feel like he's kind of been not always under the radar, really. He's been kind of the sore thumb, both in summer.
I know,
there were other issues in summer. Don't get me wrong. That team had so many issues. But even here, he's making great plays at 3 minutes and then nothing until 23 minutes. and that's not normal. If you have an advantage, you should be pushing it. And he doesn't seem to really be pushing the tempo of the game, which is very much what it's about right now. So I think there needs to be a tryout or something to make him step up his game and get a little bit more in sync with what everyone else seems to want to do, which is play very aggressively and win their lane. So that's really my question is what do we do about Lyra? I don't think there's an absolute solution. I don't want to see him gone. I want to see him improve. So I'd really like to see better stuff from Lyra, or see there are options being explored, not just we're sticking with this trust the process kind of talk. I want there to be openness and honesty when it comes to this position and this player, because he is the one guy that we kept from summer last year. He's the guy that the team was rebuilt around. It wasn't necessarily Huni and Demonte, although they were great pickups. It wasn't necessarily Piglet and Vulcan, although they were great investments last year that are now paying off. He was the guy that stayed, and I haven't really seen the reason why yet. So the one that I'm most focused on. But other than that, I think you stick with this team and continue to work forward. If they can fix their communication issues, if Lyra's English improves, or if they can figure out a person to be a shot caller, I think they're going to be able to do great things. This is a very like-minded team that honestly, when you see them all commit to something, it does look incredible. They have some perfect execution at times. It's just getting them to that point that's going to be the struggle.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. I mean, there are a lot of good North American resident junglers, right? We've seen guys like Acadian, Contracts. I'm blanking right now. Before Acadian, you had Grig come on for TSM.
Right.
There's definitely a lot of jungle talent in this region. Dardoch and Meteos, that duo for Optic, kind of coming on and off.
For sure, yeah.
So that could be an interesting place to have a little diversity on your roster.
Well, and I think you have to really introduce it in a very healthy way. I think Optic is kind of approaching that point where Dardoch and Meteos both know that they're in competition with each other, but not that anyone's definitely there, definitely off, that sort of a thing. Or take it from Cloud9 approach where you have a 7-man roster or at least a 6-man roster. We saw Blabberfish and Svenskeren be successful, each with their own struggles and differences. But Cloud9, honestly, is the template that I will use for any team that's looking to use substitutes.
Got it. Well, Zach, that does it for this episode. Try to keep them short. Give us a plug, again, for your socials. Where can we follow you and your podcast?
Well, the best place is on Twitter. We're League_Leaders1. And you can follow me. I'm at ZLindsey01. That's ZLINDSEY01. League_Leaders1 is really the best one. That's where we get all of our content. Sometimes I fall down on the job, I forget to retweet, but that's where you'll find all of our podcasts.
We're gonna look forward to that Huni episode. I love your guys, your overreaction Mondays when stuff goes wrong. It's fun to listen to. You guys handle it really well. So thanks for being on and keep up the good work.
My pleasure.